Good to have you with us in this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, tonight once again we put the spotlight on the Sushant Singh death probe. From day one till now, 114 days later, Mirror Now has only brought to you the facts. Mirror Now has repeatedly cautioned you against getting carried away by conspiracy theories. And we have repeatedly highlighted what has been the official documentation, what has been concrete proof available. Rather than jumping to conclusions, rather than highlighting the various conspiracy theories, we have in fact for the last 114 days reported simply the facts as should be the case. But I believe that once again, it is important to remind you of many of those conspiracy theories that we've busted over the past several weeks. To remind you of what the status of the actual investigation is in Sushant Singh death case. To tell you now, 114 days later, what are the facts, what are still just theories or suspicions, and what is the status of each agency's investigation. Tonight we bust certain more myths and bring about more clarity for you. Let me just tell you simply few examples just to refresh our memories and to clarify the facts. One of the biggest conspiracies has been that Sushant Singh was murdered. The special panel that was set up by the CBI that sought the help of a AIIMS board of doctors, 7 doctors on that board, that forensic report suggests no murder, a simple suicide for Sushant. The other big conspiracy theory about whether he was poisoned, the toxicology report says no traces of any toxin, any poison found. The fact that many said he was strangulated. You had all kinds of forensic experts looking at pictures from a distance and telling you where there was a malified intention. As things stand right now, CBI's own investigation, there is yet to be anything of that sort. AIIMS report itself says no struggle marks. The theory about multiple ambulances, we busted this earlier as well. The fact that the stretcher of the first ambulance was not proper led to the second one being called. The theory about more than one dead body, CBI itself is yet to find anything to that extent. And remember, it's been over a month and a half since they officially took charge of this case. That being said, before I go across to our panelists, let's say good evening to Satish Maneshinde, the man who's representing Rhea Chakraborty in this case. Mr. Maneshinde, help us understand the importance of this AIIMS report that has been submitted to the CBI. What would its value be in a legal case?
Well, I must tell you, first of all, that the Mumbai Police were investigating the case, and prior to reaching any conclusion, the postmortem report conducted by the Cooper Hospital was placed before them. The Cooper Hospital constituted a medical board of 5 doctors who conducted the postmortem under a videograph, to my knowledge, and subsequently they came to a conclusion after the toxicology report was submitted by the CFSL. And after the CFSL reported as to what its findings were, the Home Minister of Maharashtra declared before the media and the public that there was no foul play in the death of Sushant Singh Rajput. Subsequently, after the Home Minister made such a statement, the family got involved and lodged a false complaint before the Bihar Police. The Patna Police readily agreed it at the instance of Gyaneshwar Pandey, who is now known to be contesting elections. Subsequently, the Bihar government transferred it to the CBI. And the CBI came into the picture right from the first day when the matter was lying in the Supreme Court on the 5th of August. The CBI consented to the transfer, and thereafter, as per its normal procedure, the CBI, after taking over the investigation of the case on 19th of August 2020 appears to have involved a team from the AIIMS to conduct a test. The entire team visited the residence of Sushant Singh Rajput and they examined every aspect of the residence. They examined the postmortem report given by the Cooper Hospital. They, I am sure, would have apparently used all methods to come to a conclusion. And now the AIIMS is supposed to have given its finding to the CBI, which has not been made public by the CBI. Divorce all that. Right from the first day when Sushant Singh Rajput died till today, various speculations have arisen from various anchors and media reporters of the electronic media who are, according to me, half-baked. They have no criminal law knowledge. They have no knowledge about forensic medicine. They have no knowledge about CFSL. And they have come to a finding that it is a murder. So the CBI has always made a declaration that all angles in this case are being investigated, including murder, including abetment of suicide. The forensic audit of the accounts is being conducted. All efforts are being made to reach to a conclusion. In such a case, I would beseech all these people who are jumping to conclusions to come to a rest, wait for the CBI to make a declaration, wait for the CBI to file its report before the court of law, and then start, hearing their views. Instead of that, these anchors and other people who are bent upon creating a false narrative have started right from the beginning that it was a suicide, it was abetment of suicide, it was a murder, and all sorts of allegations. Then the family too has aired its views. I don't know from where they get their views, but I'm sure that a family which is hurt is trying to make its views clear. But unfortunately, they are ill-advised. They have gone to the extent of making allegations that it's murder. They are the ones who brought Sushant Singh Rajput's drug habits in public by making allegations against Rhea Chakraborty. The ED came into the picture. They created such kind of allegations
Mr.
against Rhea Chakraborty that all kinds of financial angles were discussed in the media as well as in the public. And the entire reputation of Sushant Singh Rajput has been spoiled. It has been, I can't say what has happened to Sushant Singh's memory, but they were the ones who disclosed all his drug habits. They were the ones who disclosed the factors which are now being discussed about his
if I may just come in here.
So therefore, I feel very sorry for Sushant Singh Rajput, particularly in a situation where he is not here to answer any of these questions.
Absolutely, you're right there. If I may just ask you, Mr. Vikas Singh, on behalf of Sushant's family, says that the postmortem itself that was done by Cooper Hospital was a shoddy job. Now, if their allegation is going to be that there was malified right at the start at the Cooper Hospital level, will any subsequent report be of any use, legally speaking?
Well, first of all, Rhea Chakraborty was an unknown quantity before the 14th of June. She came into picture only after the 18th when she was summoned by the Mumbai Police. She has no political clout. She is not a rich woman. She is not involved in any controversy prior to that. So there was no question of anybody doubting the postmortem report at that stage. Secondly, the political names that are being dragged into this case came into picture only sometime in the end of July. And prior to that, it was the Bollywood which was being investigated. So therefore, if the family and the lawyer advising the family are disputing the veracity of Cooper Hospital, they should have some legal basis to criticize them. Initially, it was made to feel that Cooper Hospital was a hospital which botched up investigations. But to come to think of it, In South Mumbai, we have JJ Hospital, and in North Mumbai, we have Cooper Hospital conducting post-mortem reports because they have coroner's court. If they have any dispute about the findings of a post-mortem report, they must appear before the coroner's court and lead evidence as to what they feel about it, instead of going in the public and making allegations of all kinds of nature. There is a coroner court which involves disputes, which solves disputes of cause of death. So they should go to them instead of making all kinds of allegations in the media. Media is not going to decide as to what is the cause of death. It's the courts which are going to decide the cause of death. The coroner is the one who issues a certificate after the postmortem report has been submitted before him. Only after the coroner certifies the cause of death is a death certificate issued. So people should know about it. These half-baked lawyers who come and air their differences, air their views, they should know what involves in criminal investigation. After a postmortem report is conducted, all those papers are placed before a coroner's court who issues the cause of death and who issues a certificate of death. Therefore, there are legal fora for all these disputes. Press is not the right media or a platform to air the differences.
Fair enough. My last question, very quickly, Mr. Satish Maneshinde. We don't know much about the status of the CBI's investigation, but if I can ask you, has the CBI gotten in touch with you or Rhea Chakraborty for any follow-up questions? The last we knew, she was questioned over a month ago. Has there been any further progress?
Was directed to appear before the CBI on 4 to 5 days. She last went prior to the 5th of September for her statements. Thereafter, she has not been called. If at all the CBI has investigated or gone to record a statement when she is in judicial custody, I'm not aware of it because we don't have notice of it. But if at all she was investigated or inquired into in CBI, in NCB custody or in the judicial custody, notice would have been given to us. Until today, I have not received any such notice. So I presume that since she last met the CBI, there has been no investigation as far as she is concerned. It is possible that they must be investigating other angles which are concerned with the death of Sushant Singh Rajput. So therefore, there is nothing to indicate that a further investigation has taken place. Probably once they come to a finding, they'll go back with all the material that they have to make any inquiries, if at all, they need to make. If Sushant Singh Rajput's death involves further questioning as far as Rhea is concerned.
Correct. All right. Thank you so much, Satish Maneshinde, for joining us today on the Urban Debate and taking my questions. I appreciate you taking the time out. Thank you so much. Well, without wasting any further time, we say good evening to Geeta Luthra, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, also a Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court, former Commissioner of Police for Mumbai, Mr. Raman Singh, and former CBI Special Director, Mr. Emil Sharma, joining me this evening as we bring to you a status update. The investigation by ED that registered a case on 31st of July into the money laundering case, no official update, count 66 days and counting. No clear lead into money being siphoned off as was alleged. The investigation by the CBI, you heard it from Rhea Chakraborty's lawyer as well, into the case of commitment to suicide, registered a case on 6th of August, took a complete charge on 19th of August after the SC order, yet to arrest even a single suspect. They questioned Rhea Chakraborty a few times. Over a month ago, no official update on the investigation. The investigation by the NCB that actually registered a case and began its investigation on 26th of August has so far established that Sushant Singh Rajput was a drug user, or if any of the witness statements are to be believed, and the focus seems to have shifted to drugs consumption within Bollywood. So, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, now that there is a forensic report that suggests no murder, what does that mean to the legal case that is being prepared right now?
The legal case cannot proceed as far as murder is concerned. There is no homicide. Once there is no homicide and it is a suicide, was that suicide abetted by anyone? Now, what does abetment mean? When you instigate or you engage with someone. On the facts as are currently available in the public domain, it is very clear that Rhea had lost touch with Sushant for the last 5-6 days when she left the flat. The only persons who were in touch were those who were within the flat and his family, which was also prescribing medication which was brought in from Delhi. So the question now remains, did any of those actions by any of those actors instigate or abet suicide? Though it is rather far drawn out, I don't think any case of abetment of suicide also can really be made against any persons involved. The fact of the matter seems to be that the man had a history of mental illness. There were fights over his treatment. In the meanwhile, things had not really gone well for him at that particular stage of his career. There may have been other issues altogether. He decided to call it a day. He committed suicide. For whatever reason, it has been blown up. I do think the fact that a lot of people have been staying at home due to the coronavirus and they've been switching on their televisions and going to the news channels has also contributed to a need for drama. The drama must now end. There is a lady and her brother who are in custody for something which would have been ignored most of the time. That imprisonment should also end at the earliest. That's my position.
Mr. Hegde, just before I go to the other guests, you say, Rhea's imprisonment must also end, but that case is more about drugs, the procurement of drugs, the dealing in drugs, financial transactions related to it. This wouldn't have a bearing on that, would it?
This does not have a direct bearing on it. I agree. But the fact is, but for this case and the consumption of drugs by Sushant Singh Rajput, the question of 59 grams of marijuana recovered from some other drug dealer, there was no way in an ordinary time that Rhea and her brother would have done jail time. Now, I think they have been in for at least two weeks or so. Their bail has been heard by the High Court. I would not be very surprised if they do get bail.
Okay. All right. Fair enough for that. But let me bring in Mr. M.L. Sharma. Mr. M.L. Sharma, to your mind, in your expertise, is it odd or is it normal that it's been over a month and the CBI doesn't seem to have made any progress that they have spoken about? They haven't even visibly questioned Rhea Chakraborty again in the last 5 weeks. She's their prime suspect and she's not been questioned. In fact, none of the bigger names linked to this case have actually even been questioned by the CBI in the last many weeks. What do we make of that?
See, one of the most important reports that CBI was waiting for was the report of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Now, that report has now come. It's a clinching report, as senior advocates Hegde and Maneshinde have said. They have summarized the facts. I have nothing more to add. I now believe that CBI will be rounding off investigation in another month's time. Merits the case, I'm an old hand. I won't, I won't be expressing my opinion, even though in my heart of hearts I know what's going to be. So they are advocates, they can express the opinions. I don't express opinion, but what I say is 1 month the investigation should be concluded. This is how I feel about it.
Okay, within a month the investigation should be concluded, Mr. Raman Singh, but this obviously is a big development. Since the time the AIIMS board came into the picture, the Dr. Sudhir Gupta repeatedly said there is something fishy here, there is something wrong. The post-mortem report doesn't give the time of the death, but after weeks of investigation, all 7 doctors unanimously have ruled out any murder angle or poison, being found in Sushant Singh's case. Do you think this kind of vindicates the Mumbai police, or we should wait and watch to see what else CBI finds?
Well, the final report has to come from the CBI, the investigating agency. But I would say that with this report of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, the case of murder is ruled out. Now, what this report of the AIIMS establishes is that Sushant Singh was not murdered. Now, so the allegation of murder is out. But remember, the case which is under investigation is one of abetment to commit suicide under Section 306 of the Indian Penal Code. And that remains to get a final closure. So the CBI will now be investigating. And now it is confirmed that Sushant Singh Rajput had committed a suicide. But what remains to be investigated by the CBI is that whether there was any abetment to commit the suicide. Now that aspect is being looked into by the CBI, and ultimately the CBI has to come and submit a report to the court, and that is when you will actually come to know as to what are the findings of the CBI. Now, as far as the various allegations, conjectures, suspicions, doubts created by the media and all kinds of people about various lapses committed by Mumbai Police, etc. That has all been
Mr. Raman Singh, my apologies. We have a poor network. We couldn't hear what you said, Mr. Raman Singh, and I assure you this is not a case where network fell through because you were blaming the media for what has unfolded in the last few weeks. That part of that is justified, but unfortunately, my apologies, bad network line. We're going to try and fix that line. Let me see if Geeta Luthra is with us and she can hear me. Good evening, Geeta Luthra, can you hear me?
Good evening. Yes, I can hear you as long as you can hear me. Yes. Can you
Absolutely.
hear me?
Loud and clear, Geeta Luthra. Yes, a big report. Of course, officially CBI is yet to come out and speak about it. The report submitted by AIIMS Forensic Board. But the AIIMS team themselves have indicated that all the doctors who were on the board were unanimously of the view that there is no murder, there is no malafide here, it's a clear case of suicide. How important will this report be, when the CBI finally talks about this case or presents this case in a court?
I think this report's very important. In fact, I had come on the channel or other channels a couple of times, and every time I had felt that this is a case of suicide, and that's the way the facts seem to be. There were, of course, some misgivings by other people for the reason that there were conjectures by media houses and other people, while the Mumbai police was actually keeping quiet and not showing what were the reports. Now, they could have put a clear picture out, but normally investigation and courts have normally suggested that any investigative agency has to keep quiet and not go to media. I think it happened even in that Indrani's case that the court actually chastised people for the media for doing a trial, semi-trial. So in that sense, the Bombay police not coming out and other people doing a parallel media trial probably resulted in this becoming this whole murder, and then there were all the news channels and social media. A forensic report is very important. 7 people, nobody differed, all of them have said it's a murder. Now the question then will be, could it possibly be abetment to suicide or a plain case of suicide? Given the medical history, what seemed to have come out from one or two of the psychiatrists, he seemed to be taking treatment, and it could be that coupled with other factors may have resulted in a person taking his life. Now, the very fact that Rhea was not with him for the fateful last 4-5 days, in its own way, takes away this theory of abetment to suicide. Also, the very fact of their whatever Rhea's SMSs and WhatsApp they've recovered. So I feel that this report will go a long way. Whether CBI decides to do abetment to suicide or totally exonerates her is really the CBI's prerogative. We can't say. But according to me, the way that to some extent Bombay Police seem to have been vindicated.
Okay, let me just again quickly take our viewers through what this AIIMS report seems to be saying. Basis what Dr. Sudhir Gupta himself, the forensic head of AIIMS, has said, it's a case of hanging and death by suicide. No injuries over body other than hanging. There were no marks of struggle. No seductive material was detected. Ligature mark over neck consistent with hanging. Death due to asphyxia by hanging. So, for all of those times that you read certain messages on your WhatsApps or something on social media or even in mainstream media that suggested otherwise, this is the AIIMS report itself. And the man who himself a few weeks ago was saying there is something fishy here, there is something wrong, has now turned around and said, well, everybody had a doubt when CBI took charge, the whole country had a doubt, but we've done an in-depth investigation and this is what we have found. If I can just go across to Mr. Sanjay Hegde on the point that he raised earlier. Mr. Sanjay Hegde, it's also important for our viewers to understand how difficult it is to prove abetment to suicide. What are the various possibilities, or what will CBI need to prove that kind of a case?
See, there is a very strict definition of abetment under Section 107 of the IPC. Either there has to be instigation, or you have to engage in it, or you have to intentionally aid. Now, supposing I were to, on this channel, say that many of these people who have conducted a media witch hunt ought to go and hang themselves. Would there, and somebody actually was conscience-stricken enough to do so, would that amount to abetment to suicide? No. There is no instigation which is exactly proximate. And here, in a close relationship between Rhea and Sushant, she has been away and sent away for 4-5 days, possibly after a fight, as a result of family pressure. Now, there is no way that there can be any proximate cause which is attributable to Rhea. Now, is there anybody else against whom you can say that they either instigated or intentionally aided? Well, the family which was putting pressure on him, they seem to be much more proximate in point of time, but even they would not strictly come within the terms of 107 of the IPC. I don't think even a case of abetment to suicide can be made against anyone. To come within that definition, you would probably need something like you hear of all these mother-in-law, daughter-in-law cases where where one side pours kerosene on the body, threatening it, and the other side gives a match, saying go ahead. Those are the kind of cases which could possibly come in under abetment, not something which is so far unrelated and not proximate in part of time.
Okay, not so much, when there is a gap of time when Rhea Chakraborty left several days ago, very difficult to then prove that case. Mr. Raman Singh, you're back with us. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you the last time. Go ahead, please make your point.
So what I was trying to tell Tanvi was that this AIIMS report, what it does is that it rules out a case of murder. It proves that Sushant Singh was not murdered. But remember that the case under investigation by the CBI is one of abetment to commit suicide. And on that, the CBI has to come and give a final report. Now, the ED has also made some investigations. The NCB has also made investigations. And the CBI is making investigation. A final report has ultimately to come from the CBI, which will go to the court. And then actually you will know what exactly is the final outcome of all these investigations. But what I would like to emphasize is that all the allegations which were being made through media, electronic media and otherwise, and the insinuations and conspiracy theories were being dished out, that has all been put at rest by this postmortem report of the AIIMS, because they have said clearly that there were no marks of injuries on the body, and all those angles of the height of the ceiling and the bed and things like that have been completely ruled out and put at rest, and they have given a very strong report that it is a case of suicide and not of murder. Now, what I would like to emphasize, besides all these points about legal aspects that we have been discussing and other panelists have been airing, what I would like to say that it is very unfortunate that while the case is being investigated, the media went to the town on a phishing campaign and made all kinds of insinuations against various types of people and created a big hype and a big kind of, campaign was built up to malign some people, malign the Bombay Police and some individuals also. And all kinds of people were brought on the channels and made to air their views, which was very unfortunate. I would feel that we need to have a responsible journalism and to ensure that the journalism is responsible. We don't want to put any restriction on the media's freedom of speech and reporting the truth and reporting the news and discussing news. But this kind of a spreading lies, falsehoods, and misleading the public opinion needs to be dealt with, and there should be some provision in the law to deal with this aspect also. I would also like to highlight the fact that in the beginning, as you all know, the family members also had said, and in that family there is an IPS officer also. Let me emphasize that point particularly. They all had given statements in the beginning that it was a suicide case. They had not expressed any suspicion, including the father, I'm told, and the sister and the brother-in-law, etc., etc. Now then later on, under some legal advice, the family was made to complain about the abetment to commit suicide. And mind you, this complaint should have gone to the court, to the senior officers like the police commissioner, and if not satisfied with the police commissioner's action, the advocate who was representing them should have taken the matter to the court and got a suitable order of the court to register an FIR. Instead, he took a political route, went to the chief minister of Bihar and brought pressure on him, and the DG was of police at that time, one Gupteshwar Pandey, was all too willing to oblige, ordered the registration of an FIR in Patna police station, giving the running number of that police station, which was totally wrong and totally illegal. And to top it up, he sent a police team to investigate in a Bombay crime in Bombay. The police station of Patna had no jurisdiction because simple question, if the police station carried investigation and collected some evidence, where are they going to present this case? Where are they going to present all the report and the evidence? To go to a court in Bihar? No, the court in Bihar is not competent to take cognizance. I'm talking of the legal points. There are legal luminaries on your panel, and they will. Mr. Sanjay Hegde is a legal expert, and so is my friend Mr. ML Sharma. Now, if the Bihar police comes and gives a report to the court in Bombay, the Bombay court is going to ask Bihar, who are you to investigate this case? Who has given you authority to investigate? Now, this is a completely wrong route taken, and the whole thing went topsy-turvy. And unfortunately, I may say, some people started drawing their own conclusions about political motives. I do not know, and I do not want to comment on that. But it was unfortunate that Bihar police registered a case against the XYZ, and the Bihar government took it as an excuse to move the government of India to transfer the case to the CBI. Bihar government had no business to recommend the transfer of a Bombay case to CBI. Number one. Number two, the government of India acted in a haste and transferred the case to CBI even when the matter is before the Supreme Court. And mind you, even before the case was transferred to CBI, the ED was already put on the job to investigate. So ED investigating, CBI investigating, and the NCB investigating, I think the whole might of the government of India was put on this case and they were made to investigate. Now, I am told that the advocate who represented the family, I'm so sorry about the family of Sushant Singh Rajput, and I have all my sympathies, but unfortunately I must say here very categorically that they were misled, they were misguided, because now the advocate says he doubts even the report of the AIIMS. Unless the AIIMS gives a report that suits his convenience or his logic, I think he will continue to doubt. I mean, there has to be some end to all this kind of a doubting business. On what basis he is doubting? On what basis he is going to ask that you constitute another team? I mean, there is no end to this. So I would say that this was a very unfortunate. The case was completely mishandled by various people, and the Bombay police ultimately seemed that what they had done was correct.
Mr. Raman Singh, if I may just come here.
I will end it up by saying
I'm sure the Mumbai Police Commissioner is heaving a sigh of relief.
The allegation of abetment to commit suicide needs to be investigated, and actually has to come, a final report has to come from the CBI. I will wait until the final report of the CBI comes, and then we'll better be in a better position to give a final opinion. Thank you.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we're not jumping to conclusions before CBI submits that report, because that's not what we've done so far, and I just want to reiterate that. Some of the theories that came forward: death due to Bollywood's nepotism, nothing on record so far. Death, not death by suicide but murder, that theory has been demolished. Likely rape angle, that theory has been demolished. Sushant was drug poisoned, that theory has been demolished. More than one person murdered in Sushant's flat, nothing has been found by the CBI so far. And I just want to reiterate, none of these conspiracy theories were given any credence on this channel, because there was no factual evidence available at any point in the last 114 days, apart from claims, some of them maybe by the family. And I also want to thank the four panelists who are with us. They've been, on my shows in the last many weeks, and they too have stuck to the facts, to clear logic, rather than jumping to conclusions basis reports that we've never seen, we've never heard of. Mr. Emil Sharma, if I can come back to you for one more thing, because Mr. Raman Singh raised that point. Sushant's family lawyer says that we may demand another forensic team, a fresh team, because what AIIMS team has done isn't right. Is that a possibility that the CBI can look at now?
First, before answering your question, I'd like to say that I fully endorse what Mr. M.N. Singh has told us. I can't agree with him more on all the points he has raised, particularly the point of registration of case by Bihar Police. It was always suspect. After saying this, I would say that a lawyer of the aggrieved family or victim family, he can raise any demands. I don't generally use strong words in this kind of discussion, but to me, all these 3 months, it has been, I'm sorry to say, drama of the absurd. So he can ask for it, but I personally feel, my experience 20 years in CBI, the possibility of this kind of a thing being accepted by the CBI appears to be very, very, very remote. This is how I look at it.
Okay. All right. Well, very quickly, before I wrap up, closing remarks from Geeta Luthra as well. Geeta Luthra, we haven't really heard from the CBI in the last 1 month. We know from the lawyer that they haven't officially put a request to question Rhea Chakraborty in over a month now. They are looking at other angles right now, but do you believe that even for the CBI now the case is becoming more and more difficult to prove abetment of suicide from what has emerged so far?
So I can only in a sense appreciate the CBI. They were right. They had to wait for the forensic report because ultimately scientific evidence is clearly the more superior evidence than going by any oral evidence. So you go by, in all countries in the world, you would go by scientific evidence, which is the forensic report, which has come by a team of 7 doctors of as reputable a place as AIIMS. And then you would go to electronic evidence, maybe mobile records, phone records, etc. So they had all that before them. Before they go to Rhea, that's what they needed to look at. Now that they have that, the role of what they're questioning to Rhea should be very small and should be very limited. This is one aspect which I feel. And in that sense, that's perhaps the reason for 1 month they haven't queried her. The best thing would have been to query her when she was in investigation, so that nobody comes around and says that we need her custodial interrogation for querying. I'm sure the CBI would probably not do that. Now, coming to the other 2 cases, I can see that NCB, it's a case which on this channel earlier I had said, I don't think such a case should have been made. She's not even supposed to be the user. You've got some odd WhatsApp messages. You haven't even analyzed them. The user seems to have been another person. He's not even alive. I don't understand where the NCB thing is, but luckily the Bombay High Court has reserved judgment on the bail. Now the third is the ED. Now, apparently in that also there's hardly very much which has come out. Those amounts have not been traced. Their usual partner,
Yes.
live-in relationship, small accounts. So the whole race seems to have been witch hunt a human being. And I'm not speaking for Rhea. I'm not speaking for anyone. I'm saying in our country where we want to go by the rule of law, and that every person is an innocent, we can't be witch hunting people. It can be anyone who could be witch hunted. And so whatever we say, we have to be cautious. I feel this whole case is so unfortunate, and we now have to weigh our words before we utter them, lest we malign or defame anyone.
Absolutely. In fact, thank you so much for pointing that out. And I do just want to add that this also needs to be a story and an example where people and our viewers take something back. And that is that they need to be careful about what they hear, what they read, what they watch, whom they believe, basis what facts. That's all I can say. We've constantly for 114 days only brought the facts, and I'm still doing that. I'm still saying we will wait for CBI to present its case to see what they have found in the abetment to suicide case. But as far as the murder angle is concerned, on multiple aspects now, that theory has been completely demolished, and so many other wild theories that were being floated around have been demolished. My only intent was to bring them to your notice in case you were one of those who read or watched any of those bizarre conspiracy theories and those claims and wondered if that could have happened. Well, the facts are out now. The truth is out now. The case continues. The investigation continues. Rhea Chakraborty is still a suspect. CBI is still investigating the case, and we will continue to bring you all of those updates. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation about the Sushant Singh death investigation.